Eastgate House, a splendid gabled building dating from the 1590s, stands on the High Street of Rochester in Kent. It was a building that Charles Dickens knew well. Indeed, he may have based Westgate House in his first major work, Pickwick Papers, on it, albeit if he did, he transported it, in his imagination at least, lock, stock and barrel to Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. He most certainly did feature it in his last novel, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, in which it became the Nun's House, a venerable brick edifice wherein Miss Twinkleton ran her seminary for young ladies. In the gardens at the rear of the property there stands a curious, fascinating and poignant artefact, a Swiss chalet that once belonged to Dickens, and in the upper room of which he wrote much of his penultimate novel, Our Mutual Friend, as well as what was completed of his aforementioned final work, The Mystery of Edwin Drood. This is the story of Dickens' Swiss chalet. On Christmas Eve, 1864, Charles Dickens made his way from his home, Gadshill Place near Rochester in Kent, to nearby Higham Station to take delivery of a very special Christmas present. It had been sent to him by the French actor Charles Fechter, a man with whom Dickens was good friends, and who, since he admired his abilities as an actor, he had backed financially when Fechter took over the management of the Lyceum Theatre in London's Wellington Street in the summer of 1863. To show his gratitude to the man who had been both a friend and a mentor to him, Fechter wanted to send him a special and unique gift. Socks, gloves and scarves, the latest novel by Charles Dickens. Well, let's just say they weren't the type of present that the recipient would be unfamiliar with. What do you give to a man who has it all? Thought Fechter, albeit he no doubt thought it in French. I know, a Swiss chalet. And thus Fechter dispatched his quirky gift from Paris and sent word to Dickens to be at Higham Station on Christmas Eve to take receipt of it. One can only imagine Dickens's feelings as he watched the 58 large boxes being manhandled off the train and loaded onto a wagon for the journey back to Gadshill Place, his little Kentish freehold, as he liked to call it. Anyone who has ever tried to assemble flat-pack furniture from IKEA can imagine his feelings when he inspected the 94 pieces that would have to be slotted together like the joints of a puzzle, as his friend John Forster would later put it in his biography of Dickens. Dickens had decided that the perfect location for the chalet would be a shrubbery which was known as the Wilderness and which was located on the opposite side of the Gravesend to Rochester road that passed in front of his house. In 1859, to save himself the inconvenience of having to cross over the busy and often muddy road, he had had a tunnel constructed under it to provide a convenient access to the Wilderness, a project which had been overseen by his brother Alfred. This tunnel still exists, albeit the entrance to it is now somewhat overgrown. And so work began on erecting the chalet on the Wilderness. Firstly, a brick foundation had to be laid, and once this had been done, the task of fitting the 94 pieces together got underway. Dickens's original intention was for he and his family and friends to put the edifice together. After all, what could be more conducive to domestic harmony over the festive period than collectively constructing a giant item of flat-pack furniture? But in this endeavour they were thwarted by another snag. The instructions were all in French, and since in those days there were no YouTube unboxing videos to turn to for guidance, well, let's just say, nous n'allons pas faire ça. They made a noble effort, but the task proved beyond their DIY skills, and in the end Fechter came to their rescue and sent Monsieur Gaudin, the stage carpenter from the Lyceum Theatre, to Gad's Hill to undertake the construction. On the 7th of January 1865, Dickens wrote to John Forster to update him on the project's progress. The chalet is going on excellently, though the ornamental part is more slowly put together than the substantial. It will really be a very pretty thing, and in the summer, supposing it is not to be blown away in the spring, the upper room will make a charming study. It is much higher than we supposed. According to John Forster, once up, the Chalet was a great resource in the summer months, and much of Dickens's work was done there. He furnished the top room with a small table, on which he placed a writing slope, since he always liked to write on a sloping surface. He brought in a couch and chairs. Dickens's son-in-law, Charles Collins, brother of the author Wilkie Collins, recalled how, ranged in front and round about him were always a variety of objects for his eye to rest on in the intervals of actual writing, and any one of which he would have instantly missed had it been removed. These included bronze figures of various creatures, decorated ornaments, a huge paper knife that he often held in his hand during his public readings, and a little green cup decorated with the leaves and blossom of the cowslip, in which a few fresh flowers were placed every morning, for Dickens always liked to work with flowers on his writing table. There was also a register or a calendar that showed the day, week and month, and this always stood next to him on the writing table. "I have put 5 mirrors in the chalet," Dickens told an American friend, "and they reflect and refract in all kinds of ways the leaves that are quivering at the windows and the great fields of waving corn and the sail-dotted river. My room is up among the branches of the trees, and the birds and the butterflies fly in and out, and the green branches shoot in at the open windows, and the lights and shadows of the clouds come and go with the rest of the company. The scent of the flowers, and indeed of everything that is growing for miles and miles, is most delicious." Dickens even had a telescope placed at the rear of the upper story so that he could watch the shipping on the distant river and survey the surrounding countryside. It was in the chalet that he wrote much of his penultimate novel, Our Mutual Friend, and it was also where he practised for the public reading tours that proved immensely popular in both Britain and America in the second half of the 1860s. In 1870 he began work on the Mystery of Edwin Drood, the first part of which was published on the 1st of April. His usual habit was to write all morning and then break for lunch, after which he would tend to other matters or go strolling in the Kent countryside. By June of that year he was hard at work on Drood, which was selling well, but he was in poor health, and he looked much older than his 58 years. On the 5th of June, his daughter Katie, who was married to Charles Collins, paid a visit to Gad's Hill, and was immediately struck by a greyness about her father's face. After dinner that night, father and daughter sat chatting till 3 in the morning. He told her of his hopes for the Mystery of Edwin Drood, observing, "If, please God, I live to finish it." He then added, "I say if, because you know, my dear child, I have not been strong lately." Katie and his other daughter Mamie were due to travel to London together that morning. Before their departure, Katie came to the chalet to say goodbye. Having kissed him farewell, she made her way down the tunnel steps and back to the house. But as she waited on the porch for the carriage to take her back to the station, she had an uncontrollable desire to see him once again. So she hurried through the tunnel, made her way up the stairs of the chalet, and knocked on the door. When he bade her enter, she ran in, and on seeing her, he rose from his chair, opened his arms, and embraced her. That was the last time that Katie saw her father alive. 2 days later, on Wednesday the 8th of June, Dickens spent the morning writing in the chalet, but so anxious was he to finish the instalment of Drood on which he was working that he decided to break with his usual routine, and having gone back to the house for lunch, he returned to the chalet and worked through the afternoon. Cloisterham, the fictitious city in which much of the Mystery of Edwin Drood was set, was based on the nearby city of Rochester, and on that afternoon, in his mind's eye, Dickens set off to wander through its streets and past its buildings en route to the old cathedral, as his pen danced across the page, setting down the last words he would ever write. A brilliant morning shines on the old city. Its antiquities and ruins are surprisingly beautiful, with a lusty ivy gleaming in the sun and the rich trees waving in the balmy air. Changes of glorious light from moving boughs, songs of birds, scents from gardens, woods and fields, or rather from the one great garden of the whole cultivated island in its yielding time, penetrate into the cathedral, subdue its earthly odour, and preach the resurrection and the life. The cold stone tombs of centuries ago grow warm, and flecks of brightness dart into the sternest marble corners of the building, fluttering there like wings. A few paragraphs later, Dickens, having described a very neat and clean breakfast which had been spread by Mrs. Tope, set down his pen and left the chalet for what would be the final time. Making his way through the tunnel, he returned to the house, where dinner had been arranged for 6 p.m. As they were dining, his sister-in-law, Georgina Hogarth, who had stayed on as his housekeeper following Dickens's separation from his wife Catherine 12 years earlier, remarked that he looked ill. He replied that he had been very unwell for about an hour. His speech then became incoherent. He mumbled about going to London, staggered to his feet, and became unsteady. Georgina rushed over to prevent him from falling and tried to get him to the couch, telling him that he should lie down. "On the ground," was his response, and so saying, he fell heavily on his left side. The servants helped lay him on the couch, and there he lingered unconscious for the next 24 hours, during which his family and friends began arriving at Gad's Hill to be with him. Just before 6 p.m. on Thursday the 9th of June, his breathing became more laboured. Then a tear rolled down his cheek, and at 10 minutes past 6, he died. It would be some time before the family could bring themselves to cross under the road and make their way up to that room in the chalet in which he had spent his final afternoon. The first thing they noticed as they entered was the register on his writing desk, the date still set at Wednesday, June the 8th, the day on which he had last sat at the slope and written those final paragraphs of Edwin Drood, which was now to be his final and unfinished novel. The chalet would later be moved to the grounds of nearby Cobham Hall, before being moved again to the gardens of Eastgate House. And here it stands today, where it is visited by Dickens enthusiasts from all over the world. Sadly, you can't go inside it anymore, but you can at least spend a few moments, or longer if you desire, admiring it from the outside, as you remember the author whose genius has given us so many wonderful characters and storylines, Charles John Huffam Dickens, the immortal and inimitable Boz.